Hi, good morning, Paris time, and good afternoon, Beijing time. Welcome everyone to the second webinar in the China's electric city power sector transformation webinar series. My name is Pirapat from the International Energy Agency. I work in the Renewable Integration and Secure Electricity Unit. First of all, I'd like to thank you, our partners from the China Electric Power Planning and Engineering Institute, the Royal Danish Embassy in Beijing, and Danish Energy Agency for co-hosting this webinar. And thank you for the support from the China National Energy Administrations, the French Development Agency, AFD, and also from the European Commission through the Horizon 2020 program. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. This webinar is public and the main part of this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be available on the IEA website around tomorrow. There is simultaneous interpretations between Chinese and English. So you have to choose your language channel by clicking at the interpretation button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So in order to keep the sessions running on schedule and allow questions from the audience, we would like to remind the presenters to respect your allocated speaking time. We're planning to have a brief Q&A in each sessions if time permitted, and also to have a more in-depth debate in the panel discussions for around 40 minutes. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar through the Q&A functions that you can also find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Questions can be submitted in Chinese, as we have a colleague who can help translating them into English. Now, I would like to pass the floor to Ambassador Thomas Ostrup Moller, the Ambassador of Denmark to China at the Danish Embassy in Beijing. Mr. Moller, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much and good.
好，谢谢，非常感谢大家，下午好。非常高兴的能够看到国家能源局的林明阳处长，以及来自于 IEA 的几位专家，包括在座的各位专家和发言人，以及我们在线的各位观众。
To deliver this opening remark at our second webinar of the China Electric Power Sector Transformation Series. And I would in particular like to thank everyone who has been involved in organizing it. I deeply appreciate in particular the mutual trust and cooperation with our Chinese partners, as well as the vast numbers of stakeholders engaged in the collaboration between China and Denmark, not least the International Energy Agency. Today's event is an excellent example of collaboration across government authorities and international organizations, with a program featuring expert speakers from multiple countries and entities who will share their perspectives on topics like smart power systems, electrification, green hydrogen, and power to X. I think we can look forward to a very interesting educational and maybe even problem-solving webinar today. Denmark has a strategic comprehensive partnership with China, and together I believe we have developed a very successful government-to-government cooperation across a number of areas. And that is, I can assure, no small feat, and it is in fact something we are very proud of in Denmark. The Sino-Danish Energy Partnership, which started more than 10 years ago, is one of the most significant pillars of our bilateral cooperation. And as China and Denmark increase their green ambitions and promotion of green development, I believe the partnership is becoming even more important. That is reaffirmed yesterday during a joint working group meeting between China's National Energy Administration and the Danish Energy Agency, in which the China Renewable Energy Engineering Institute and the Danish Embassy also took part. All parties, I can report, agreed to continue and deepen the bilateral cooperation within offshore wind and clean heating in the coming years. Highly important areas which are indeed very crucial for achieving a green transition in the energy sector. The transition of power systems towards modern low carbon pathways and technologies is imperative in order to meet climate goals, while also enabling other critical objectives such as sustainable economic development, energy access, and energy system resiliency. Today, the power and heating sectors are responsible for around 1/3 of global CO2 emissions. Therefore, enabling forward-thinking long-term strategies in the power sector is a crucial area for international collaboration and support, which definitely underline the relevance of today's webinar, because sharing knowledge and successful experiences is an important contribution to a global energy transition. Denmark, as you probably know, is one of the first movers in implementing a green energy transition across all sectors and aims to become independent from fossil fuels by 2050. The Danish power system has been undergoing a transformation, moving from highly centralized to a decentralized structure in electricity generation. There has been significant increase, especially in wind power and in distributed generation from combined heat and power plants since the 1980s. And broad-based political agreements on energy policy have provided security for investors, while at the same time enabling a smooth and continuous transition to sustainable power sector. The liberalization of the Danish power sector is one of the steps that led Denmark to be a frontrunner in renewable energy. And today, Denmark is the country with the world's highest share of variable renewable energy in electricity production, and has been, I believe, for many years. Wind and solar power, in combination with flexible thermal power plants and international transmission networks, supply the Danish electricity demand, providing low electricity prices and contributing to a high security of supply as well. These achievements could not have been reached without a structural transformation of the electricity sector, including the unbundling of generation from the natural monopolies of transmission and distribution services. On that note, I would like to end my opening remarks by wishing everyone a great webinar and extend my warm thanks to all stakeholders who have contributed to the webinar. Thank you so much. 谢谢.
Thank you, Ambassador Thomas Astrup Møller. Now I would like to pass the floor to Dr. An Phuong Xuan, the Senior Advisor of the International Energy Agency. Dr. An, please.
Thank you, Pierre. 谢谢大师先生，谢谢。
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Also, thank you, Mr. Liu Mingyang, for your opening remarks. I also would like to express my thanks to all the colleagues who will speak later.
China's electric power sector transformation. It's a great honor for all of us to sit here discussing about China's electric power sector transformation. China's electric power system is the largest. It is also growing rapidly while facing many challenges and opportunities. Proper transformation is urgently needed to tackle the challenges. Last year, China has committed to try to reach carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. In order to realize the dual ambitious carbon commitment, Chinese government decided to deepen power system reform and try to establish a new type electric power system with the new energy as the main source. All these commitments and decisions provide strong guidance for China's electric power system transformation. We can say only through a rich, fast, and sustainable electric power system transformation, electric power sector can realize dual carbon targets while ensuring China electric power security. As the global energy authority, the IEA has been taking the leadership in global clean energy transition and carbon neutrality. AEA also pays high attention to China's power system. AEA has published and are going to publish many analysis reports related to China, such as China Carbon Neutrality Roadmap 2060 and the 14th Five-Year Plan on study on renewable energy development. The AEA has recently released a series of flagship reports on electricity security that cover three key aspects: energy transitions with more variable renewables, cyber resilience, and climate resilience. Many workshops and webinars have also been held around China. These publications and events play an important role in reaching China's energy planning and policy and enhancing China's capacity building. Actually, power system transformation are really complex. Many issues are still hot topic and under debate. The recent blackouts in Texas and California, the United States, aroused many concerns and debate about China's power security in the future. The transformation is actually multi-targets, including power security, net zero emission, affordability, job creation, justness, and so on. I'm happy today's topic will be around digitalization and smart grids, battery storage, distributed energy resources, green hydrogen, sector coupling, and electrification. I'm expecting more amazing and creative points and ideas from our excellent speakers. These ideas will surely be beneficial to China and other AEA stakeholders. Many thanks to our speaker and audience. I would also express my appreciation to NEA, EPPEI, the Royal Danish Embassy in Beijing, Danish Energy Agency, the French Development Agency, and the European Commission for their kind support to this webinar. Wish the webinar success. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. An. I'd like to take this opportunity to again thanks Mr. Louis Ming-Yan, the Division Director at the NEA, Ambassador Thomas Ostrup Moller, Ambassador of Denmark to China, and Dr. An Fu Xuan for the great opening remarks of this webinar. So now I'd like to move on to the first sessions of this webinar. So the first presentations we hear about the future power grid development to facilitate renewable integration in China. The presenter of this will be Ms. Wang Kai-Xie. She's an expert at the Department of Renewable Energy and Statistics at the State Grid Energy Research Institute. Her main research areas are power system operation analysis, with large scales of renewable energy. So I now like to pass the floor to Ms. Wang Kai-Xie to go through her presentations on this grid development in China. Ms. Wang, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'll share my screen. You can see the screen well?
Yes, we can see the screen well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. So, so ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share future power grid development to facilitate renewable energy integration in China. Here I will have three parts to share. The first part is the current status of renewable energy development in China. And the second part is practices of state grid to facilitate renewable energy integration. And the third part is future power grid development. So the first part, I'll briefly go through the current status. So by the end of 2020, the cumulative generation capacity of wind and solar in China is 530 gigawatts, which is around 24% of the total generation capacity in China. And in the year 2020, we see a larger scale development of wind and solar in China. The newly installed capacity is 120 gigawatts. If we look at wind and solar separately, by the end of 2020, the cumulative installed capacity of wind is 280 gigawatts, and the percentage is 13% in the total generation. And solar, the cumulative installed capacity is 250 gigawatts, and is around 12% of the total generation capacity. The installed capacity of renewable energy by regions. Actually, in the 13th five-year plan on the development of renewable energy, it is encouraged that a wind and solar be installed in areas with good resources and better grid integration conditions. Actually, over the past 5 years, wind and solar, we see the change of layout of wind solar in China. Now, by the end of 2020, 51% of wind are located in North China, East China, and Central China. And for solar, this share is higher, is 64% of solar located in Northeast and Central China, which are the load centers in China. The energy share of wind and solar in China by the end of 2020 is 9.5%. Actually, this share is higher in the state grid operation area. In the state grid operation area, this share is 10%. The utilization rate of wind and solar in China by the end of in 2020, the utilization rate of wind and solar has reached 97% in China. Actually, this is a big improvement from the conditions 4 or 5 years ago. In 2016, actually, we have very severe wind and solar curtailment in some provinces in China, especially Xinjiang and Gansu. And in 2020, this condition has improved a lot, especially for the first time. The wind and solar utilization rates in Xinjiang and Gansu has reached 90% and 95% respectively. And this was 80% or even lower 4 or 5 years ago. Now we look at wind utilization rates is 97%, and for solar is higher a little bit, 98%. So the above are the current status of renewable energy development in China. So the second part, over the past 5 years, actually, we took a lot of effort to alleviate the curtailment conditions to facilitate renewable energy integration. Here I summarized the 3 aspects. One is the ultra high voltage transmission and inner province transmission lines were constructed to enhance transmission capability of renewable energy. During the past 5 years, China has built 11 AC lines and DC lines and also more than 100 key inner province transmission projects were built to enhance the accommodation capability of wind and solar, and also following the requirements of the National Energy Administration, timely and efficiently interconnection of wind and solar being connected to the power grids were ensured. So the second major aspects is flexibility of the power system was promoted with multiple measures. During those measures, we have first acceleration of ancillary service markets. Actually, we had this downward regulation ancillary service market started in 2014 from Northeast China. And since then, we have more and more provinces have their own downward regulation ancillary service market. And by the end of 2020, 5 regional and 13 provincial grids under SGCC officially have this downward regulation ancillary service market. So the second measure is to continuous efforts on the retrofit of thermal generators. Actually, this is written in the 13th five-year plan. So over the past 5 years, a total of 162 gigawatt of thermal generators in the SGCC area were retrofit to be more flexible. Their minimum output are incentivized to be lower so that they can have more room for renewable energy. So the third measure here is initiating coordinated dispatch of generation, power grid, electric load, and storage. We have some dispatch centers, they have this new types of resources like storage, like demand side resources being connected to the dispatch system. Even though the capacities of energy storage, thermal storage, or customer or other demand side resources are not that big, but we are moving in that direction. So the third major aspects we use to facilitate renewable energy integration is to encourage them to participate in the electricity markets so as to incentivize more customers to use renewable energy. We look at the market in 2 aspects. One is the interprovincial electricity market, which is to trade renewable energy in a larger scale. In the SGCC area, the total amount of wind and solar traded in the interprovincial electricity market in 2020 was 91.5 terawatt hours. It's mainly traded in the long-term market, and a very small portion of them is traded in the spot market for renewable energy. So the long-term market here in China is mainly the yearly, seasonally, monthly market like that. And the other part is a provincial electricity market. And we have around 95 terawatt hours of wind and solar being traded in provincial electricity markets in 2020. So it's mainly through direct trading between renewable energy and electricity consumers, and through generation rights trading between thermal generators and renewable energy. For future power grid development, as we all know, President Xi announced that China will aim to have CO2 emissions peak before 2030 and a carbon neutrality before 2060, and we will have the wind and solar capacity to be over 1,200 gigawatts by 2030. So we can see that, we can anticipate that in the future, there will be faster and larger scales of renewable energy development in China. Of course, this will bring challenges to the power grid. Here, I summarize those challenges in 3 aspects. One is to ensure the secure supply of energy in the system. As we all know, wind and solar, they have this characteristic of variability, right? And in recent years, we have some extreme weathers, so we have extreme high load during the summer and winter. So how to secure supply of energy is a big issue. And so the second challenge is to ensure the security of power system operation. And the third one is to ensure efficient utilization of renewable energy. Can we also guarantee 90% or 95% or higher or other higher utilization rates of renewable energy in the next few years? So this is also a big challenge. For the future power grid, actually, the State Grid published its action scheme on how to achieve the 30-60 goal in China. And some of those future power grid development aspects I put here is in that scheme. For one is the development of power grids of both transmission and distribution level to enable the local consumption of renewable energy and as well as long distance transmission of renewable energy. Second is enhancement of the inter-regional transmission capability. Actually, 7 ultra-high voltage DC transmission lines are already planned in the 14th five-year plan, and this will adding new transmission capacity to the system. And the third one is to support the development of distributed energy resources and microgrids, as we could also anticipate in the future, distributed renewable energy will be a big part in the renewable energy future. So the power grid should enable them to be utilized in a more intelligent way in the system. And the fourth is the implementation and integration of new technologies, such as big data, blockchain in the energy and power sector to promote the interaction between those different types of energy resources. And the other is the further enhancement of system flexibility. Here, I think besides conventional measures such as the retrofit of thermal power plants, building pumped hydro, the deployment of large-scale energy storage will play a bigger role in the system. And the other part is the optimization of power dispatch and operation for better coordination of these resources, especially wind, solar, hydro, thermal generation, and also these generation sources with storage, with resources from the demand side. So the last two, the one is to facilitate the construction of electricity markets that adapt to high penetrations of renewable. We are moving in that direction in China. We already have 8 spot market pilots in China. We'll have more pilots in the future, and how to integrate high penetrations of renewables is something we are thinking of in those market building. And the last one is to support various integrated energy services, especially to unlock the value of demand side resources in the system. I think this will play this need to play a much bigger role in the system. Yeah, that's my presentation. So I hope my time is okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wang. Just to all attendees, you can submit your questions through Q&A functions. And then we'll have if we time permitting, we will go through the questions. Thanks again for the presentation. You touch on a very important point in terms of the security of supply, because the increase of the number of extreme events that we have had over the past several years. And also you mentioned technology options to help to integrate more renewables, such as storage, distributed resources, and demand side responses, all of which will be here from the presentation today. Next up, I would like to invite Mr. Chen Haisheng to talk about the storage technology and application progress in China. Mr. Chen is the Deputy Director of the Institute of Engineering Thermal Physics at the Chinese Academy of Science. His main research areas include novel compressed air energy storage systems, supercritical fluid energy storage systems, and novel heat and cold storage technologies. So Mr. Chen, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction.
It's okay for me to give the presentation in Chinese, so I will give the presentation in Chinese later. I mean afterwards. Thank you for your listening. 我报告的题目是中国储能。
So I will deliver my presentation in English, in Chinese, sorry. There are 5 parts in my presentation: introduction, technology status, application status, and also the development trend in China, and then some concluding remarks. So first, the background information of energy storage. This is the definition of energy storage. Energy storage, by its name, refers to a process of storing energy via some medium or devices. Energy storage have a broad and also narrow definition. In the broad sense, it refers to all forms of energy. And more specifically, for electricity storage, there are 2 types of technologies: physical and chemical. For thermal energy storage, it refers to 3 types of heat storage: sensible heat, latent heat, and chemical heat storage. Needless to say, energy storage is very significant. It's a technology of strategic importance. We know that since the 3rd industrial revolution, with the introduction of renewable energies, we will see higher demand and need for energy storage. First of all, we have more mobile devices, which will create huge demand for energy storage. In the past decade, globally and also in China, the number of mobile devices have been growing exponentially. Over 10-fold of increase was witnessed in the past 1 decade. So this created huge demand for energy storage. Second, electric vehicles and also electric bikes, scooters. Those new devices in the transport sector also increased by a factor of 10 in the past 10 years. Third, the rapid expansion of renewables. In the past 10 years, we have seen the pumped hydro energy storage technology demand also has a remarkable progress.
与发展的共识。所以说呢，在根据国际能源署和咱们国际可再生能源署都对未来的
together with the rising installed capacity of renewables, there is a ever-growing demand for energy storage technologies. There are different predictions. I won't go into all the details, but based on different sources, the demand for energy storage technology will grow by over 10 times before 2030. The technology status in China, this is the physical energy storage technologies. So it doesn't involve any chemical reactions. Here there are 3 main types of technologies: pumped storage, compressed air, energy storage, and flywheel. For chemical technologies, it involves lead-acid batteries, lithium-ion batteries, sodium-sulfur batteries, and liquid flow batteries. So they can be applied to sensible heat, latent heat, and chemical heat storages. For pumped hydro, there are many benefits. As you can see, it has larger capacity, longer longevity, small unit investment, technology maturity, but there are also some weaknesses and drawbacks. It has geological constraints and also featuring a higher and longer construction period, and also have a bigger environmental footprint. In China, the pumped hydro technology is quite mature at the current stage. The second major category of technologies, compressed air. The benefits, large storage capacity, high efficiency, relatively small investment. The drawbacks include the consumption of fossil fuels and also the dependency on air chambers. In China, we have some demo projects on 10 megawatts. We are piloting 100 megawatt level compressed air energy storage. It is estimated that by the end of this year and earlier next year, we will be able to launch the first demo project for compressed air energy storage. at the 100 megawatt level. For thermal energy storage, again, large capacity, longer usage life, smaller unit investment. The weaknesses include lower energy density and also high temperature erosion of materials. In China, we see some applications in the construction projects for heat storage and also cold storage in southern China. And right now, it's primarily being used for sensible heat and latent heat. We have some mature application cases and also some demo projects. For chemical heat storage, it is still being studied. Flywheel is a totally different physical energy storage technology. The benefits include high power density, higher number of charge and recharge cycles, lower environmental requirements for operation, and low pollution. Drawbacks, there are some energy loss because when the flywheel spins, it will reduce energy efficiency. In China, we have the low-speed flywheel under 6,000 rounds per minute at a megawatt level. In overseas markets, the speed is higher, over 10,000 rounds, and they are studying 30,000 to 40,000 rounds flywheel. For lead acid, the benefits are low cost, mature technology. Weaknesses include low energy density and potential pollution. In the future, China will need to focus on reducing its pollution footprint while enhancing its energy density. Lithium ion, another very mature technology in China, high energy density, efficiency, and quick response time. Drawbacks include high cost and also safety. In China, we have 10 megawatt grade applications. The highest one is around 30 megawatt for demo projects. If we apply the distributed model, then combined, they can reach 100 megawatt level. For a flow battery, we are also seeing different types of liquid flow batteries in China. The benefits, large capacity, and also long usage life, higher power, and also higher capacity. But the weaknesses include high cost, and since it involves rare materials. So in the future, China will need to work on reducing the cost of vanadium. In China, we already realized the 5 megawatt and 10 megawatt vanadium flow batteries in Liaoning province and also in Dalian city of China. Also, the vanadium sulfur battery in the city of Shanghai, we have imported technologies from Japan above 300 megawatt, high energy density, easy access to materials. Drawbacks include high temperature and also high requirement for safety and also slow start. We have already realized some demo projects in China, but looking ahead, we need to develop high quality porcelain tube technology and also medium and low temperature applications.
Now I want to address the application status quo. the energy storage has extensive application in the power sector, including the generation side, transmission, distribution, and residential and commercial and industrial sides, especially massive scale connection to the grid to help phase out the older power units and for dispatching, for auxiliary services, and for voltage support. When we sort of group the different application scenarios on one heat map, the vertical axis is time, the horizontal axis is power. You can see depending on different combinations of power and time, there will be different choices. When I also map the different technologies of one map, different technologies can meet specific needs. So currently, the energy storage application would need the coexistence of all kinds of technologies to meet diversified needs. In China, we have the following application scenarios. First, centralized wind, solar farms plus energy storage. For example, Huadian Tianren State Grid and the Fengbeizhen Town Wind Farm as an example. In this farm, we can generate more power by fitting the farm with energy storage units. And also, for example, by installing the facility, we can generate more. And if you invest in the energy storage, you will be prioritized as the first connectors to the grid. And also, it can be fully involved in the ancillary service market and to deal with the peak shaving at the peak hours, and can benefit from peak shaving services. And also in the ancillary service or the frequency modulation services, it is working together with the coal-fired power plant. So the quality of the output can meet our dispatching needs. So basically, the electricity output quality can be rewarded in the ancillary service market, or to just to reduce the fines, which is a kind of profit you gain. And in many provinces, they have local specific regulations. We can also use energy storage at the grid side, especially for pumped hydro. We are using a third-party company to be the investors to build storage facilities of pumped hydro, and then it will be leased back to the grid, the state grid, the Guowang Xingyuan State Grid New Energy Source Co., and also Shuangqiao Co-Limited under Southern China Grid. They are leasing the pumped hydro facilities from the third-party investors to basically avoid investment in the expansion of traditional transmission and distribution networks. And at the user side, it's basically distributed PV plus energy storage. Basically, they are getting the profit from the spread between the peak hour tariff and valley hour, off-peak hour tariff. So basically, they can delay the expansion of their generation facilities, and they can get profit from the spread between the peak and off-peak hour tariff price. So these are the scenarios, the 4 scenarios already being used in China. And also we have another model which is being developed, that is the sharing storage model. Basically, we would have a company who invests in and operate a storage facility. It can provide energy storage services to the grid and to the power gencos, and also to the users. Basically, multiple stakeholders can share the same storage facility. Maybe one genco plus one storage company plus one users. And also, it can be a one-on-one configuration or a multiple power gencos plus one operator of the storage facility. So there can be multiple configurations and install capacity of a storage in China. by the end of last year, according to the China Energy Storage Association and the NEA statistics in the whole world, we have a total capacity of 191.1 gigawatts and newly added 6.4 gigawatts, year-on-year growth of 3.3%. Basically, the molten salt and flywheel and electrochemical and compressed air storage facilities are added. But in China, still pumped hydro accounts for the largest share, followed by the electrochemical and then compressed air, flywheel, and molten salt technologies. By the end of last year, we put into operation 35.6 gigawatts with a newly added capacity of 3.2 gigawatts, year-on-year growth of 9.8%. Electrochemical, for the first time, reached more than 1 gigawatt, and China accounts for around 18% of the global energy storage market. Now I want to talk about the future of energy storage. Now we can recap its evolutionary stages. From 2000 to 2010, it was the testing phase, and from 2011 to 2015, pilot phase. From 2016 and 2020, the preliminary commercialization phase. From 2021 this year to 2025, we expect to see a ramping up stage to have a preliminary establishment of a fully commercialized market and with certain technologies leading the whole world with a mature market model. And there is another track of development. Energy storage is a cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary technology realm, starting from materials, units, systems, and applications, involving multiple disciplines like materials, like electrics, or thermal engineering, or information cybernetics, mechanics. So it's like a cross-cutting area of different disciplines. That is going to be the new technology path. And also we will have a long-term coexistence of different technologies, but some technologies would dominate the market in the long term, and some emerging technologies will pop up. The price is going down too. We calculated the price from 2013 till today. You can see the curve is going down very deeply, sharply. Every year it will drop by 15% or even further. So actually, we believe that now better technologies and scaling up will continue to push down per unit price. We're not really at a mature stage where the price will remain stable. And also installed capacity of storage in China will continue to pick up growth. We have different figures. By 2025, maybe around 100 million kilowatt and maybe 200 million kilowatt by 2030. So the market is growing and expanding. At the end, to sum up, the Chinese government strongly support energy storage. In 2017, in October, at the end of September and early October, it published the guiding opinions regarding further promoting the development of energy storage technology and industries, the very first national level policy document, spelling out 5 key areas and some demonstration projects, and also the targets for the 14th FIP period. And later, across the whole country, you can see all these different supportive policies and documents, including the different central ministries, government agencies, and the grid operators, the industry and commerce regulatory authorities, and local government authorities. They published all types of supportive documents. In particular, in 2019 and 2020, many different provinces, around 20 provinces, published the local requirements to ask a renewable project to be fitted with a storage facility. So basically now in 20 provinces today, if you want to invest and ramp up a new renewable project, you have to build storage facilities. So this is kind of consensus that renewable has to be fitted with storage. So we have a broad market prospect that needs different technologies have different application scenarios and features. And the storage technology and industries are growing so fast. In the 14th FYP period, we expect to have even greater scale for storage industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for the presentations. We are a bit behind schedule, so I'll just take one question from Ms. Wang, and then the other questions can be discussed in the next session if time allows, or in the panel discussions. So for Ms. Wang, there's a question in terms of what would be the role of demand side management, both for industrial and individual consumers, to increase the flexibility of the Chinese power grid. So please, if you can respond to the questions.
Yeah, so thank you, Pirapatch. So yeah, thank you for your question. So I think demand side management will play an important role, especially in ensuring the secure supply of power system and also system stability with high shares of renewable energy. Actually, during the cold wave at the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021 in China, the demand side management has played its role in ensuring power outages in the southern part of China. So in the future, with high shares of renewables in the system, I think there will be more challenges brought by low output of renewable energy and a high electric demand. So in those periods, if we can use resources from the demand side, I think that will be very important to ensure the security of supply and also the stability of the system. Thank you. I hope that this helps this question. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ms. Wang. For Mr. Shen, there are a couple of questions, but we can ask you for your thoughts during the panel discussions. So for this now, I'd like to move forward to the next sessions. I would like to pass the floor to Sune Sorensen at the Danish Embassy in Beijing to moderate the next session.
Thank you, Pirapatch. Thank you, everyone. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Mr. Gregers Larsen from the Danish Energy Agency. He is a talented energy expert and project manager who has been working in and with China for more than 6 years. He has also been directly involved in the development of the China Renewable Energy Outlook, every single version of it. Today, he will tell us about green hydrogen, key challenges and perspectives from Denmark. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to you, Mr. Larsen.
Well, thank you very much. We just have to start video. I'm not allowed yet. Thank you very much. And as per usual, we just have to get Hotwire up. Just for a second. I think you should be seeing my screen now. Can someone please confirm that for me?
We can see it, Gregers.
That's good. And I presume you can see my face too?
Unfortunately, not at the moment, only on slide 2.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm having a bit of a Zoom issue that happens at times. Give me just 1 second. I should be able to maybe fix things. No? Okay. Interesting.
Gregers, would you also be able to switch to full screen?
Yes, I am trying. I'm just having to see if I can fix things here, and then I should be able to. Can you see my face now?
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay, we'll do it without my lovely face. You will have to do with slide 2. I hope that is okay with all of you. But do you see my screen in full screen?
I do not here in Beijing. It's still not full screen.
Should be better now.
Perfect now, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Apologies. Niemen Hao. I am, as soon said, Gregers from the Danish Energy Agency. And I will speak a little bit to the Danish PTX strategy concerning mostly electrolyzers and how to use that on the demand system. So just to be upfront, the top messages is that Power-to-X is not a primary technology. It's not what we are most concerned about, and neither we think we should be, but it is a necessary technology in the long run. And that is because it is useful for the high-hanging fruits, where we are usually talking about energy efficiency and direct electrification as being lower hanging fruits and something that should immediately be changed. There are some sectors, which I will cover in a second, that are much more difficult, and that's where PTX is really a useful technology. And it is, as it is new almost everywhere internationally, Denmark has just started this process, and what is being done, I will cover in these slides. And I will also cover how we are using 2 primary technologies where there has been a discussion mostly between EU and China on which one should be useful. And the Danish interpretation is both, but we'll get to that. And then also we will talk very shortly about some of the technical limitations about PTX utilization in the future. So let's get into the details. So just to cover the basics, when we are saying green hydrogen, we are talking about renewable energy, specifically VRE. Sorry? I think someone is not muted. It's okay. That uses water and electricity, of course, through some type of electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen. And that is mostly useful for that having green hydrogen that can be used for both heavy transport and shipping, mostly in very short distance shipping industries. That are a lot of industries that directly can use it as energy, but also as a alternative to natural gas or even coke in some heavy industries. And then electrolyzers, fortunately and unfortunately, produces quite a lot of excess heat at about 80 degrees. So that is useful for district heating, excess heat district heating. And furthermore, having this pure hydrogen or high quality hydrogen, we can mix that with other nitrogen to create ammonia, which is very useful for shipping, long distance shipping. And we'll get into that. Denmark has a special interest. And also we can actually mix that with existing CO2, meaning carbon dioxide, to produce e-fuels such as methane, methanol, DME, and different kinds of similar to fossil fuels, but actually made green fuels. And these are generally spoken as e-fuels. So that is where the situation is in terms of the technology and the usefulness that we're going to use. And the reason why we are not full in, or we don't consider PTX as the most primary technology, is because we have a high difference in end-to-end efficiency. If you take something like for cars, and we have battery electric vehicles, as you are well known in China, they have a quite high efficiency end-to-end because of the overall efficiency of just producing electricity and transporting directly into a battery with few losses. So the overall, we could say, electron to wheel efficiency is about 77%, assuming 100% renewable energy. If you make the same assumptions for hydrogen and for fuel cell vehicles, which isn't electric vehicles, but it is powered instead of batteries through fuel cells and thereby using hydrogen, this efficiency falls to about 30% due to high losses in electrolyzers, or higher losses in electrolyzers. If you're doing the same calculation, but for e-fuels, meaning upgraded hydrogen with something like CO2, so we will have conventional vehicles as we're using today, using internal combustion engines, this efficiency falls all the way down to 13%. So there we have more or less our priority as we see it in Denmark, that BEVs or direct electrification in broad terms is the favorite technologies where we will do this. And then PTX is secondary, but it is very useful for where maybe not in cars, but in other sectors where direct electrification is very difficult, either because of their needs or the way that they consume energy is problematic for direct electrification. So I just want to talk a little bit about the green hydrogen technologies that are in play in Denmark as it is now. So we have two types of electrolyzers. Generally, there are a few more types, but these are the two main types that are being discussed in policy today. One of them is alkaline, which is the classic type of electrolyzers. These are the most favorite in China at the moment, because mostly they are cheaper and they don't use rare materials, and they do actually have a better efficiency, slightly better now than the PEM counterparts. The problematics in terms of using variable renewable energy for these is that they have a very limited ramping up and down. So they are more or less a constant load on the system, and they have a very limited capabilities for start stopping. So having a cold start for alkaline electrolyzers is very difficult and takes a long time. PEM, on the other hand, can cold start quite well, and they have very good ramping capabilities, especially both up and down. Unfortunately, they do use some rare earth materials, and it is much more expensive on the CapEx side. And the major global discussion has been is that, again, China has for now favored alkaline, and the EU has favored PEM for the two different reasons, cost and flexibility. So from a Danish point of view, which one should we use? Well, both. And this is the reason for this. The reason for this, I will get to in my next slide. So here we have one of the most renewable and windy days in 2019, or weeks, sorry, in 2019. And this is the load of the supply side with demand shown on the line. I will just focus very, very quickly on a very specific time. What we have here is where we have overcapacity of renewables in our system, and this will be much more usual. This is a default almost coming from 2030, where we will have hopefully more energy efficiency in our usual demand, but at the same time investing quite a lot more still in both PV panels and wind turbines. That means that the duration of these systems, these hours where we have more green supply than demand, is going to be both a longer term, which is good for a more or less a baseload occurrence, which is alkaline, but we are also going to see more stiff peaks, higher peaks, which is where a very high rate, flexible technology that can use green electricity is very useful, which is what we see in PEM. So this is the reason why we are actually looking into both and investing both in Denmark. So I will just speak about the current plans and projects that we have in Denmark, because while we are at the starting gate, we are running out of them as fast as we can. So in terms of industrial interest, there is already a lot of industrial interest in Power-to-X in Denmark. And what you can see here is some of the biggest consumers of fossil oil fuels in the world, which is something like Maersk. shipping company, and some of the biggest suppliers or investors in green energy supplies. So it's Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, CIP, and Ørsted, which are investing globally in wind turbines. So they have made a consortium together, both for the supply and demand side, simply saying we are coming together to make a middle point between green energy supply and the hopefully not too longer fossil demand that we want to make green. So there are a number of ambitions of this. So Maersk has a current ambition that they want to have the first fully green CO2-free vessel no later than 2030, and have made a new part of their company just focused on this, and have put a substantial million euro amount in this. This is about slightly less than 1 billion yuan that they are investing in this over the next 10 years. And then at the same time, they're having a vision in Denmark of having a few places that will supply gigawatts of electrolysis plants for production of green fuels, both e-fuels and just hydrogen. So in terms of direct RD&D projects going on, these are the first 4 projects we have coming from 2020 in Denmark. So we have, as you can see, we have both a GreenLab Skive, which is a 12 megawatt electrolysis and battery, and that is alkaline, and the battery is to add flexibility, which is an interesting way of doing it. We have a Shell oil company wanting to make further investing into PEM for use in refining, simply making green fuels in an already existing refinery spot near good power lines. And then we have some local PM for transportation, mostly big transportation. And then of course Ørsted and Partners that for now will make a 2 megawatt electrolysis for transportation and are further expected to invest quite a lot. And all of these are government supported as of now, because it is a new market, of course. So ambitions in Denmark, the PTX will grow to become a very significant sector in the industrial and fuel sector. And so you see, as we are where we are in 2021, we haven't actually laid ground for the first PTX industry yet, but that will come in 2022 and 2023, and it is expect to grow very rapidly, very, very high until 2040, where our analysis goes to. For reference, that is in 2030, that's 1 gigawatt of electric capacity, and in 2040 it's 3,000 or 3 gigawatt of electric capacity. And in 2040, the just electricity demand from PTX alone will constitute about what in today's terms would be about 8% of the total energy consumption in Denmark. Now, of course, this seems quite large, but we have to remember this will also supply quite a big part of Denmark's energy supply for heavy transportation and shipping, which then puts it into a perspective as being a quite useful technology, and will replace especially heavy fuel oil and diesel in the system. So we're quite happy about these ambitions. So just to wrap up, so heavy transport, shipping and aviation will be the major consumers of PTX. These are the high hanging fruits, so to speak. There still needs to be plucked. These are the places where we have the most difficulties of making things green. We have projections to have PTX as a major part of the Danish energy system, somewhere around 5 to 10% of our total energy demand. It is less than Power-to-X is less efficient, and it will have higher both capex and opex cost to direct electrification, and that means that direct electrification is what we are actually seeing as the primary focus, and PTX is the primary focus for where that doesn't work. But already now we see that the relevant industries know this, and with support from the government or from us, they are already working on investing and supplying themselves with PTX solutions, where nothing else is really applicable. So we are starting a transition already. That is what I have. Xi Ximen, and I welcome questions in the Q&A.
Thank you, Gregers. Thank you very much for a very instructive presentation. It's quite interesting to hear that PTX will become a major part of the Danish energy system. I'm sure there will be questions later, and I hope we can get around to give you an opportunity to answer them. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Bram Claes. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Mr. Claes is a senior advisor at the Regulatory Assistance Project. Prior to this, he was General Director of the Renewable Energy Federation, ODE, in Belgium. Former roles also include serving as the advisor on renewable energy to the Flemish Energy Minister in Belgium. I could go on. He has also been a member of the Advisory Council of the Federal Energy Market Regulator in Belgium. He holds 3 different degrees. He's a chemist by training. He has degrees in environmental management and international cooperation. Now, he will tell us about the beneficial electrification, sector integration. I can't wait. Please, Mr. Claes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sune. And I hope that you can hear me okay and see my screen with the presentation.
Loud and clear.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting us to this very important and interesting panel. I hope to contribute to the discussion today and look forward to also discussing with the public, with the participants later on. I think my presentation will be quite complementary to what we already saw this morning. I'll be looking at the role that electrification, and in particular the demand response from electrified transport and heating can play in the new electricity system of the future, and talk a bit about how that can be promoted. First, a couple of words about the Regulatory Assistance Project. For those that don't know us, we're an international NGO. We're independent and we advise regulators and other energy stakeholders in setting up regulation to accelerate the energy transition. We're all utility or environmental regulators, experienced energy professionals, and we're active in the most important power markets in the world, the US, Europe, China, and India, and have been very fortunate to be able to work in China as well for more than 20 years now, showing some recent publications that we've done on the power sector reform in China, and also collaborated with some of the distinguished colleagues here today on the webinar. So I hope to be able to share some of our experience on the topic of today. I'll be, of course, talking about sector coupling. As you all know, we're faced with a paradigm shift from a centralized to a decentralized energy system. Technology, of course, which we've heard about already this morning, economies of scale, driving down costs, and also market and regulatory reform with an enhanced role by consumers themselves and different actors entering the energy markets as a result of unbundling and liberalization. Now, part of this trend is electrification of previously separate sectors, such as transport and building heating, which creates an opportunity, but also a challenge to integrate all of that in a well-functioning and reliable energy system. Now, electrification and power sector reform are really closely related in our view in all countries and regions around the globe. These 2 points shown here on the slide are true for Europe, North America, and China. And they are that, first of all, if we want to have electrification contribute to air quality improvements and reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, we will have to have a good power sector reform that changes the electricity generation mix with rationally designed markets, better planning, and of course, very important, well-enforced environmental regulations. Second, equally important point is controlling the cost of electrification and support the integration of renewable energy in the energy system. And for that, we will depend on power sector reforms that unlock the flexibility of electrified end uses. And that's where I'll be focusing on in the rest of my presentation. As we know, and we've already heard this morning, China has emerged as a world leader in several aspects of electrification. For example, the uptake of electrified transportation. And so there's definitely potential for China to also become a world leader in terms of the power sector reforms to revamp the way that end users are interacting with the power grid. Now, at the Regulatory Assistance Project, we like to look at electrification through the lens of what we call beneficial electrification, which consists of electrification that is beneficial for the public interest. We don't want to do electrification just for the sake of electrification. Of course, we want to enhance the energy system and create electrification that promotes sector integration and is in the public interest. Now, in order to achieve beneficial electrification, in our view, this electrification has to meet one or more of the conditions that are shown here on the slide without adversely affecting one of the others. And I'll be going through those. First of all, we want to save customers money over the long term. We want to reduce environmental impacts. And very importantly, we want to have electrification also enable better grid management. So electricity and electric applications very often and still today are capital intensive. At the same time, they very rapidly decrease in costs. Because of a much greater conversion efficiency, can save customers money over their useful life. A version of this slide we've seen in the presentation by Gregers, who focused on transport. And the same message is true for direct electricity generation and also building heating. Shown here at the top is the traditional way of generating electricity, heating buildings or transport, who today, because of the thermal conversion inefficiencies, are typically showing quite substantial energy losses between the energy input and the useful energy output. And that's, of course, unfortunate, first of all, because of the energy inefficiency and the resource inefficiencies, but of course also means a waste of money. In the energy system of the future, where electrification will become more and more important, we will see that go hand in hand with very dramatic improvements in efficiency. Renewable electricity generation from wind and solar have almost no losses in converting their resource to electric output. The most dramatic example is in heating, where compared to an 85% efficiency of a traditional gas condensing boiler, heat pumps have a much higher conversion efficiency using ambient heat from the atmosphere or from the underground to useful heat for building heating or for cooling in the summer. The same holds with, depending on the exact technology, efficiencies of 300 to 400, sometimes 500% efficiencies. And then transport, where electric vehicles have, of course, a much higher efficiency than traditional gasoline or diesel cars. This leads to cost competitivity already today by solar and wind generation compared to traditional thermal power plants providing base load. The total cost of ownership of electric vehicles is also coming in the order of magnitude of traditional internal combustion engines. And for new buildings, heat pumps today in efficient buildings are cost competitive against the traditional fossil fuel heating. For existing buildings, there is of course a big challenge for heat pumps against traditional heating, where in our view additional measures will be necessary to make them cost competitive, including a rebalancing of taxes on electricity to fossil fuels used for heating. And I'll dive a bit deeper in that because it's important. This is a picture of today, but we of course also need to keep an eye on tomorrow. And considering that fossil fuels will no longer be able to be used in the coming decades to heat buildings, here's a picture of two potential ways of providing heating in a climate neutral way. And this is a very hot topic of debate today in Europe and around the world, and dives into the question of whether hydrogen or methane derived from hydrogen would be a good idea to provide this heating. And this is from an ICCT, very recent ICCT report comparing the expected cost of providing heating through an electric heat pump in 2050. So it's a projection in the future, and compare that to a hydrogen boiler using green hydrogen generated from wind or solar in an electrolyzer. And their conclusion is very clearly that the expected cost in the future of the all-electric solution will be substantially less than the hydrogen route. And in this example, about half compared to a hydrogen boiler. The same holds if you want to use hydrogen from steam methane reforming coupled with CCS, by the way. It's quite a robust conclusion, including sensitivities around gas prices and electricity generation prices from wind and solar, confirming basically also what Gregors just said, that hydrogen is probably not the best energy carrier for heating. Also, from a consumer cost perspective. So that's very important to take away. Then diving into the reduction and the needed reduction of environmental impacts from electrification. Of course, we all know, and we've seen already also that electricity generation is increasingly green. In our view, not green enough yet, but it's evolving in the right direction. And here's a picture, very recent picture from the European Union showing the electricity generation mix over the last 4 years, with the variation in throughout the different quarters. And 2020 was the first year where across the year renewable energy share in electricity generation was higher than the fossil fuel share in the European Union. Of course, I'll immediately admit that 2020, because of the corona pandemic and associated economic downturn, was an exceptional year with very low demand. Nonetheless, we do see that the trend is towards higher shares of renewables and less fossil fuels. And that's good, that's important. Similar picture in China, where we see the share of coal in the electricity generation dropping substantially from 78% in 2009 to 64% in 2018. And more than half the growth in China between those years was non-coal. So that's definitely very good. However, of course, we know that there's significant still new coal capacity under construction. So that's a reason for concern and definitely attention. Now, with these evolutions in the electricity mix, the application of electricity in delivering end-use services means that those applications also become cleaner than their fossil alternatives. And just one example here is how heat pumps today are already cleaner in terms of CO2 emissions per kilowatt hour than traditional natural gas boilers in the UK. And of course, the more efficient they are, expressed by their COP, the coefficient of performance, the more efficient they are, the cleaner they are. And the same holds for overall environmental impact of heating technologies. Shown here is a very rigorous assessment of the external costs of heating. So it's a quantification of the impact of emissions from heating on air quality, human health, and also climate across different heating technologies. And what is immediately clear here is at the top that heat pumps, both air and ground source heat pumps, are the cleanest in terms of environmental damage costs of all the space heating technologies. And so compare that to the traditional fuel, oil, and natural gas technologies at the bottom, who are much higher in impact, and definitely all the wood using technologies in the middle that have a very high air quality impact through the emissions of particulate matter. So, excuse me, conclusion from this is that looking at electric alternatives for space heating is also a very important strategy to reduce air quality impacts. And of course, the good news is that heat pumps are also very flexible in their application, similar to electric vehicles. Now, leading into the next and last part of my presentation, it's important to understand the emissions effects of changes in load, meaning when you actually consume electricity has a very important impact on the emissions associated with that electricity consumption. Shown here is 2 winter days with the emissions of CO2 per kilowatt hour in those half hours. And you see that the emissions vary quite significantly through the day, with lower emissions associated with high generation of wind and high emissions associated with no emissions of wind and no generation by wind and solar. So switching to low emission hours would also reduce the environmental impact of electricity consumption. Now, how to do that? Looking at how these electrified end users can support better grid management and also deliver on the other benefits of electrification, it's going to be crucial to manage the load. Demand response is the solution to a lot of our problems here. It can be a benefit, it can also be a problem, but we are going to look into how it can be a part of the solution. Obviously, using electric vehicles and heat pumps means that you draw high amounts of power for a short period of time. I have an electric vehicle myself, and I can see in my in the platform showing the results of my smart meter what the impact is of our when we plug in our car, leading to peaks of up to 8 kilowatts for the time that we charge it. So it's really important to try to steer that demand in the direction of it being most useful for the grid. And so it's important to recognize the value of that flexible load. Why is that so important? Because it will empower consumers to improve their charging behavior or the use of their heat pump and be in control of it. And it will also help to save money. At present, most electricity consumers will have a flat electricity tariff that doesn't give them any incentives to charge at a specific time. At the same time, we know that, for example, electric vehicles are parked most of the time. Some are parked 21 to 22 hours a day, which leaves plenty of time to charge them at the most convenient time for the grid. Normally, you need around 3 to 4, maybe 6 hours, depending on the capacity at which you're charging. So you're only needing charging time for a fraction of the time that you're parked. So using price signals will help steering the charging time to the time, for example, when the sun is shining or when the wind is blowing. So that's going to help integrating renewables. It will also help system operators to address challenges with operating the grid safely. The slide here shows typical load profiles in a system with a lot of wind and solar. And so after the sun goes down and the sun is setting, the evening peak might not be over yet. The evening use peak might not be over, and you can see very quick ramping up of the load. Shifting some of that load to the time when there is sun or wind power will also decrease the need to ramp quickly. And that's very important for system operators. This will allow them to not have to use very expensive resources to provide that ramping service. And it's of course also beneficial to the consumers if you can avoid those typically very high cost hours, either because you're on a variable tariff or because the high costs are not being included in the overall rate. And I know that China is doing a lot of underlying work to create the structures to identify and quantify the high cost hours and send the right economic signals. So this is definitely something, an effort that should be continued to be able to also better use the clean resources that are available. Now, once you've identified those expensive and cheaper hours, it's important to design tariffs to reward also flexibility. And really what it's about is that you should use rate design to make the consumer make choices in order to minimize their own electricity bill, consistent with choices that they would make if they would minimize electricity system costs. So the implementation of time varying electricity rates, both for energy and network use, is going to be really important because it's going to shift the load to cheaper hours and it's going to avoid unnecessary investments. So a couple of examples of that. This is a very...
Mr. Claes, it is a very, very interesting presentation and a very interesting topic, but we are running out of time. So okay. I will just give you a chance to conclude your presentation very quickly, please.
Yep, thank you. And I'm sorry for running a bit long. Just a couple of examples of time of use tariffs. This is a very simple one for electric vehicles. You can, of course, and we definitely recommend to go to more dynamic tariffs to give more fine-tuned signals. But definitely also realize that this is part of an overall strategy for demand response integration, where pricing is one part, smart technology and smart infrastructure are no less other important parts. So to conclude, a couple of principles for heating and transport electrification. Always start with efficiency, but then recognize the value of a flexible heat load, understand the emissions effects and drive to minimize those emissions, and design tariffs to reward flexibility, both for residential as well as commercial and industrial consumers, of course. So with that, I will conclude and look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Claes, for a very, very interesting and very comprehensive presentation on sector coupling. I really appreciate it. Because we are a bit constrained with time, I will not pose a question for you now. Hopefully, we will have time to do it by the end of the seminar. But I have also been looking forward to introduce the next speaker, Ms. Pauline Henriot from the IEA. She is a policy analyst in the Energy Efficiency Division. Before joining the IEA, she worked first at the French energy regulator on distribution tariffs and smart grid regulation, if I'm correct, and then in a utility on flexibility schemes for power consumers. She holds a master in economics from Université Paris Dauphine and a diploma in economics from École Normale Supérieure. Pauline, please, we have been looking forward to this. The floor is yours.
So, do you hear me? Do you see my screen?
Yes, would you make it full screen as well, please?
Yes, should be good now.
It works, thank you so much.
So, good morning, everyone, and thanks for participating. So I will be giving a presentation on how to harness distributed energy resources. So first, we will have a look at major trends that shape the power system. The first trend, I'm not going to spend much time on it because it was already discussed in other presentation. It's the power system going to centralize to decentralize. A second major trend, it's the increased need for flexibility. it was discussed also earlier, but here I would like to show it in another way. What you see, all these dots, it's the difference in consumption from 1 hour to the other. So we see that for now we have need for flexibility upwards to about 15%. And this is going to increase in a massive way. So that's why we expect in 2040. And in addition, all these figures, they were created before China announced its net zero target. So I think it might be even bigger now, the need for flexibility. And so here are the major trends that we are: this increased need for flexibility, increased need for decentralization so that we can integrate more renewable. So the good news is that digitalization is going very fast. So if you look at population, it increased by a quarter. GDP by a half. Electricity use by 70%. The number of internet users increased tenfold, and the internet traffic increased so much that now the size of it does not fit in the slide. So digitalization and data technologies, we will have them. Another good news is that we expect many flexibility sources to be available. For instance, the IEA estimates that by 2040, we might have 1 billion households that are connected and 11 billion smart appliances participating.
Sorry, Pauline, to interrupt. I think you're on the not the full screen mode. You're on the presenters mode.
Sorry, because in previous one, I could not see my speaking notes, which was a bit difficult either.
But this one, we can see your speaking note as well.
Okay. So here you see my speaking note. Well, I will stop share and reshare. So.
Now we see you, Pauline, but not your slide.
Sorry. And now?
Now it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So where are you? So yes, so we expect billions of smart appliances to be connected and to be technically able to provide flexibility. Another thing we expect is that digital flexibility, by which we mean disconnected appliances plus in-house storage, will be able to reduce significantly the curtailment of solar PV and wind that would, without them, be necessary to balance grids. And another technology that we see increasing is EV charging. And EV charging, depending on how it managed, it will be part of the solution or part of the problem. As you see here, between the scenario where people charge the vehicle just when they need it, they come home and plug it, and a scenario in which you have smart charging, which means that those that can will delay charging until off-peak time. We see that there is a difference from 1 to 2 in the peak capacity required to serve all those electric vehicles. And that's only the beginning of what EV can do, because in addition, you have the possibility of vehicle to grid. Here, it's not just a vehicle charging off-peak, it's a vehicle using their batteries as storage to inject into the grid when needed. And what we see is that peak capacity without vehicle to grid, that's a 2030 estimate, renewable do not contribute much to it. But if we add vehicle to grid possibilities, we see that a large part of peak capacity could be managed thanks to vehicle to grid. So now we've seen that. We've seen that digitalization is coming, that flexibility technologies, they are available. So what is the difficulty? The difficulty, in fact, is in harnessing this demand response. The theoretical potential for flexibility, it's huge. We see it's in thousands of terawatt hours. The difficulty is tapping it. Currently, it's not much tapped. And what is tapped is mainly large plants like industry. But if we want to succeed in having a fully flexible system, we will need, we have seen it, to go by billions of connected devices interacting. So it's a large, a brand new scheme, and that's the difficulty, is accessing all those billion connected households. So for that, what do we need? First of all, we need to invest into the grid. Grids are already, and invest to make them more digital. Grids are already becoming more digital, distributed and smart, and we see that investments is less on traditional equipments and more on new drivers. We see that today, between smart meter, utility automation, and EV charging and infrastructure, it makes more than 15% of total spending. And we expect this trend to continue growing, but for now, they are not growing fast enough if we want to fully digitalize grid. So that's the first step, investing in digitalization, investing in sensors, investing in connected device, but it's not enough. Towards smarter grid, investment in our hardware is just one part. What we must emphasize is smart grid is not just the result of deploying these digital assets. The major investment will be in adjusting operational practice to make sure we benefit from these new tools, that utility will use them correctly. So we need to incentivize them, and so the other investment in policy and institutions, so that policy will incentivize uptake of all these connected devices that can unlock household flexibility. So concretely, what does it mean? Here we see that there are many axes in which work is needed to make the system more flexible. We will start at about 10 o'clock. The first is to encourage technology and business model innovation, which includes regulated companies. The electricity field is very regulated, and which means government should also encourage regulated companies to innovate. For that, what do we need? The main block, the higher points, is improve access to energy-related data. There will be data, there will be sensors everywhere, prices are going down, but we must be sure that this data is accessible, is used. So for that, we need standards, we need the interoperability, so that data flow in every direction. Now, if we have this massive data access, we need adequate protection from cybersecurity threats and data privacy risk. So that is a whole new scheme. And it's not just about making data and grid secure, it's about making trust visible. We want consumers to trust that their data is secure. With that, we may make sure that consumers are maybe willing to invest in devices to make to automate their use and make them flexible. But we also need to incentivize them to ensure that energy markets value digitally enabled flexibility. That was discussed previously. We will need a tariff that encourage consumer to consume off-peak. We will need perhaps specific reward for those who bring higher flexibility and quick answer. And this will make sure that consumer will want to adopt these flexibility behaviors and flexibility devices. Next, we need to ensure equitable access to digital technology and infrastructure, because it's not just being willing to connect your heaters so that they shift load if needed. You also need to have enough broadband so that it works. So here there is massive infrastructure investment needed too. Another part is that it's not just about consumer being willing to have a connected device in their home. It's about being able to use all these connected devices. So we need to change in the way utility operates, which means increase digital skill and plan for job market transformation. The job at a utility will not be the same as before, and we need a skilled workforce for that. Another angle needed is to minimize negative environmental impacts. Obviously, all these smart grid, they are here to help making flexibility and integrating more renewable, but we must also consider recycling of batteries, of solar panels, and so on. So here you see, in fact, a lot of questions, a lot of projects, and the IEA is trying to answer this question. We are launching a new project called the Trident Project, supported by the Italian government, whose aim is to provide actionable guidance in all those fields to help smarten the grid. It will last 3 years, and we will be really glad to discuss and interact with all interested parties to help build this policy recommendations. And so, yes, it's more a challenge where I'm not coming with ready-made answers, but what we must, the main takeaway is that smart grid, it's not just about investing in digitalizing grid, it's a whole, it's the whole utility system that needs to adapt. And just one last point is that we have discussed a lot about smartening grid, flexibility, shifting loads, but all this, but still we must not forget that energy efficiency still is the main driver to a sustainable development scenario. We must not just be flexible, we must be energy efficient. And so for the smart policy, we must add energy efficiency policies. There are three main types of energy efficiency policies. The first are regulations, which mean, for instance, minimum energy performance standards, building energy performance code, vehicle fuel efficiency. This type of regulation, they help to unlock the largest and often the cheapest amounts of energy savings. So they are the first block of efficiency policy packages, but we should not forget information and incentives. They help to provide a pull factor to encourage consumers to go beyond purchasing minimum standard or average efficiency producing service, and to go further and increase their own energy efficiency. So thank you a lot for hearing this presentation, and I hope we'll have some time for questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you very, very much. We are, unfortunately, a little bit strained on time. And since there are no questions from the audience, I would like to give the baton to Mr. Kåre Sandholt, who will be moderating the panel discussion. I would have, however, also encourage the audience to ask questions for the last three speakers in the Q&A compartment. I'm sure they will be more than happy to answer them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Sune. I will take over here and ask the panel to open their videos. We have a great panel today. Let me briefly introduce them. Firstly, we have Jiang Ping, the Vice President of State Grid Energy Research Institute, and I must say an old friend of mine, so good to see you. We also have Pablo Hevia Koch, the team leader of the Danish Energy Agency. We have Cesar Alejandro Hernandez, the head of Renewable Energy Integration and Secure Electricity Unit at the IEA. We have two previous speakers we already met, Zheng Haishan, the Deputy Director of the Chinese Academy of Science, and Bram Claes, the Senior Advisor of the RAP project. So welcome to you, and we are short of time, so let's jump into it. The starting point for our discussion is the fact that China has decided on to go for carbon neutrality in 2060 and the carbon peak in 2030, which, as mentioned, calls for a radical transformation of the power sector with the renewable energy as the mainstay. And we had a number of excellent presentations today on how to transform the power sector to accommodate these ambitious targets. So I will, as a start, I will ask the panel to briefly reflect on this presentation and to share their viewpoints on the best way for China to move forward in this energy transition. And Jiang Yiping, let me start with you. We heard from this excellent presentation from Wang Taixia that
你好，大家能听见吗
？Go ahead.
OK， 好的
We hear you.
我觉得今天这个发
Okay,
言，
thank you very much for your introduction. I have benefited a lot from the previous presentations. I can see that all of us are highly concerned about the clean energy transition. We have seen many consensus. This is really very pleasing. Actually, Ms. Wang Taixia already introduced China's planning for low carbon transition is regarding our policies on the power sector. How are we going to approach the low carbon transition? She has done a very comprehensive introduction. And for me, I would like to add a few points. First, I think the three presentations by our international colleagues are all topics that we are going to pay attention to in the future. I'm not sure whether you have been following the development in China in recent days. Hydrogen actually is a priority area in China right now. Many local governments are making investments and drafting policies for hydrogen. A renowned expert from the China Academy of Sciences, Professor Ouyang, said on several occasions that for China to develop green hydrogen, it will be very beneficial for the power sector, and also it will help China tap into the wind power resources in Western and Central China via the ultra-high voltage transmission lines. These power will be transmitted to the coastal areas for green hydrogen production. This is a very attractive scenario and pathway because they have done the economic feasibility study of tapping into wind power in Western China to produce green hydrogen in the coastal areas of the country. And also I have learned from the Danish presentation on green hydrogen. We know that there is also residue heat and excess heat in the process of electrolysis for the production of hydrogen. We can find ways to utilize the heat as a byproduct of green hydrogen production. I think this is an area where we can see potential cooperation in China to use renewables from the west of the country to produce green hydrogen in the east. This is a very attractive user case in China, and it also represents a very important exploration of China. And I think the most important aspect of this challenge is to tap into the idea of the Internet of Energy, because we see elements of renewables, long-distance transmission, and also production of green hydrogen. So this is what I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jiang Yiping. I will ask Pablo from the Danish Energy Agency to reflect on the presentations and maybe also, since Denmark is a country with vast experience on integrating large-scale renewables, what are the good learning points for China on this?
Thank you very much, Kåre. Well, it was a very interesting set of presentations, and I think that many of the topics that were discussed address head-on the challenges and possibilities that China has today in their path towards the development of a carbon-neutral society. Of course, the peaking and the phasing out of coal is going to be one of the main variables, and then many of the tools discussed today are going to be framed in terms of how they can support this process. One of the things that we've looked at in Denmark has, of course, always tried to capture the low-hanging fruits and an efficient and swift continued implementation of solutions that actually today already exist, but can be further developed, is going to be one of the most efficient and cheap tools that China can utilize. Things like further developing thermal power plant flexibility, increasing the efficient use of interconnectors, such as highlighted by Wan Kaixia. I think that energy consumption efficiency is going to have a central role. I very much agree with what Ms. Henriot mentioned, that we need to consider the development of energy efficiency as well as a tool towards achieving the framework that we need for these ambitious goals in 2060. One of the things that we have established as central in the development of the Danish power system is that flexibility by itself is not the objective. Flexibility is a tool towards a bigger objective that can be the adequacy of the system. And in that manner, trying to focus on how we can create a power system that is adequate and trying to solve that problem by finding the right solutions instead of putting the solutions as the objective by themselves is going to be possibly the most efficient manner and development path for China in this manner. And in that line, I believe that the further development of a wide power market at the national level will provide a very solid framework that will definitely accelerate and simplify the implementation of different technological solutions towards China.
Thank you, Pablo. Alejandro, you have an extensive overview of the global power system development. From your point of view, what is the way forward for China to both maintain the security of supply and to have this radical transformation of the power sector?
Thanks, Carl. I think we have to bear in mind that there is amazing opportunities coming in the coming years. And this brings basically, when we are talking about biorenewables, it's the possibility to harness huge amount of energy on the benefit of the society. And there are other technologies coming like storage that often we think they are part of the security of the providing security of the power system in the future. And I think we should take use. If I had to do one step forward, I think this is a bit doing echo of what Pablo said. I think the markets will be an excellent tool in order to make this transition a smooth transition at a low cost, without compromising electricity security of supply. And that means that the energy should be valued at not at the right price, but also security of supply would be should be valued. And that means good market designs, saying, okay, for instance, that the technologies that are available when there are moments of stress in the system, they should be rewarded for this kind of systems. So I think I understand policymakers' point of view when you see all this array of technologies, and that you have to say, okay, in which direction I should be looking at, what I should be deploying. China has already taken the decision of implementing power markets. And my first recommendation would be to say, use this tool. This is a very powerful tool that will allow you to push many of those decisions into market participants that will bear the benefits and the cost of their decisions. So I think that's for me. I would leave it at that point.
Thank you, Alejandro. Let me go to Chen Haisheng. Thank you for your excellent presentation on storage technologies.
Sorry, Carl, just interrupt, Carl. I think, Mr. Chen, he has to go. So he has some urgent matters, so he had to leave. So he
sorry, I saw him still attending, so I thought he was able. But that leaves more time for the rest of the panel then. Bram, I will go to you. Maybe you could elaborate a bit more on the policy measures needed for this, for promoting the beneficial electrification and the sector coupling and flexibility and digitalization. What is your advice for China on the policy measures here?
Yes, thank you, Kara. I think we've already heard a lot of interesting developments going on in China, and I think it's clear that for China as well as the rest of the world, electrification and power sector reform are interdependent. There's a lot of progress being made both on the generation mix as well as the build out of the transmission and the power system infrastructure. And we've heard about the developing balancing market, which is very important, developing ancillary services. So that's great, and definitely, of course, not a task that has ended. Much remains to be done. But I think given that the urgency of addressing air quality challenges in China, limited natural gas supplies, and the strategic importance of electric technologies for the national industrial policy, I would suggest that it could actually be advantageous to China to electrify even faster than the US or Europe in order to get the benefits of electrification. And I think where some opportunities still remain in power sector reform is in getting the price signals right. I've pointed at that in my presentation, and would definitely encourage going forward in identifying the true value and flexibility associated with the true costs of the electricity system throughout the day, in order to be able to give better granular price signals to consumers. I would definitely encourage policy coordination and learning, shared learning across China, the US, and Europe in order to drive large-scale commercialization and adoption of these technologies. So I think we're living exciting times, definitely challenging times, but I'd like to be optimistic and see it as exciting and an opportunity both for industrial and consumer interests. So let's make it happen together.
Thank you, Ram. Jiang Yiping, could I return to you with two questions here? One is regarding the power market, the role of the power market. We heard both IEA and DEA point to power markets as a crucial tool. How do that look in your opinion? The second question is this regarding electrification. Should China go for a very rapid electrification, although the supply sector is still dominated by coal? Or what is the need for pace on electrification?
我先说关于电力市场。
Okay, let me first share my view on the electrification prospect. To me, I don't think electrification itself is an objective. I think electrification represents the result of the energy transition. In terms of the primary energy sources, in the future, definitely we are going to transition to non-fossil fuels, especially for power generation. For end consumption, primarily we are going to see changes in the transport sector, which used to rely on fossil fuels, gasoline and diesel. But going forward, we will see more EVs, even fuel cells, hydrogen, for example, which will require electrification in the first place. So I think electrification, to me, represents a final outcome of the transition instead of the other way around. It is something that the whole society will go into throughout the process of transition. I think for the power sector, what we need to do is to pay attention to the challenges in the process of this transition. While we allow for different roles played by different energy forms, we need to strike a balance to give the best play to each types of energy form, as long as it can contribute to the transition itself. So we have covered different topics, including smart technology, the demand response, and also green hydrogen development. All these are very exciting aspects of the transition, which will eventually lead to a greater level of electrification, and they need to be utilized. This is my basic take on your question. I'm not sure whether I have answered this question.
And regarding the power market issue, right? Is the question about the power market?
It's more, how do you look at the role of the power market in China's energy? Yeah, power market.
这个市场啊，我们始终认为市场的这个重要性真的是非常非常强。但是大家
We always stress the power of the market. It's very important. It's essential. The power market, China, you probably feel that reform is stalemated. Deputy Director Chen Haisheng left already. He would probably agree with me, because in future, when we scale up the energy storage, we need external condition. We need to have a good market for energy storage. Otherwise, people are not motivated to further develop or scale up storage. In the 14th FYP period, I think the central government will have a clear direction for us. Now, the power market reform in China, in the mid-long term, there's a lot of debate, market first or scaling up first. People don't have consensus on where the reform goes to. Now, President Xi Jinping has made a pledge. I think now people feel this pressure on them. Previously, we don't have this national pledge. People could debate, keep on talking. But now we have two timeline to deadline. So in the next 14 five-year plan period, we have to deal with this issue and come up with a very clear, substantial direction. Otherwise, we would miss the target.
Thank you very much, Jiang Liping. Alejandro, do you have any reflections on the short-term measures and what is needed in the 14 five-year plan period to set the right direction, as Jiang Liping mentioned?
Yes, I think among the many, I would go in both directions. We have many options. We have many technologies. But from the things that we have heard, we have to understand well what are those opportunities that are already there, the deployment that is already there, and on the assets. We have a lot of existing assets that they can provide many services. So I think it's important for us to understand what is what we can already do with existing with the things that we have already there in the fleet, in our assets, and things that are technologically maybe available, but maybe they are not necessarily needed immediately. And I'm just saying, for instance, on there are many. I understand that China is a very digitalized society. And this will open a huge amount of opportunities. But for instance, on the kind of a modeling exercise that we do at the IEA with China, modeling the Chinese power system, the industrial demand side response potential is huge. It's very, very large. It looks like it's a large manufacturing powerhouse, and that gives a huge, different to many other economies in the US or Europe or Latin America. The large share of manufacturing demand in the electricity demand, it makes a big difference. It looks a bit like my home country, by the way, like Mexico. The demand side from the manufacturing part is relatively easy to harness. I would say it's like a low-hanging fruit, to use that term. And so I think, without completely acknowledging that we have to take stages to go into more sophisticated demand-side response, we should also already start with all the existing opportunities there. And that's where I would put my bet. No, that's in all these opportunities is part of the demand, part of the supply side. All these opportunities are already there, and that right now we are not taking advantage of.
Thank you. Thank you. Jiang Liping.
Yeah. 我特别赞同刚才这位先生的这个意见。
I totally agree with Mr. Hernandez. I can briefly introduce this part. State Grid Co-Limited, SGCC. A couple of years ago, it started an initiative in different provinces. They sort of use 5% of the demand side response capacity for demand side regulation. They just put aside 5% capacity coming from flexible users, and they put that capacity into a big pool, which can offset the peak hour needs gap. But yes, there is a pool existing, but we don't have a market to push people to put more into the pool. So we need to work on the market side.
Exactly. Very, very good point. Pablo, any recommendations for the short-term policies?
Well, I think I'm completely aligned in terms of the importance to increase the participation and have as much as energy traded as possible as part of the pool, as part of the market. We see that as we increase the amount of players, we increase the amount of stakeholders on the supply and the demand side, we can actually start to exploit the advantages that we would expect from such a system. I think that effectively, now that we are at portas of the new 5-year plan, China is in an extremely interesting period. It is a period full of possibilities, over which I am personally very interested. I think that trying to design policies that will provide, in the short term, clear signals for the long term is going to be essential to make sure that the pilot projects and that the tests that we have in China will succeed, and that in the end we reach a critical mass of actors, for example, in a market pilot project, that will be part in the long term. There is always a risk that adoption of new technologies, of new measures, does not happen if there's a perspective that these measures will only be for a short term, and if there's no addressing of the regulatory risk that developers can face. So in that sense, I think that for the short term, it is very important to think of the long term and to try to communicate this as a regulatory agency, as a government institution, to all stakeholders that are active in the power system. How can we make it so their decisions today, while they try to minimize the risk, are in line with the developments we want to see on the pathway to the carbon neutral 2060?
Great, Pablo. And perhaps some final words from you.
Sure. Yeah. On the short term, I think it's great to look at the potential that's already there. I would definitely concur with unlocking the potential in the industrial sector. When we looked at the potential for demand response in Europe, we saw that eventually there was a potential to contribute 15% of peak load by demand response. So that's really important and substantial. But looking a bit closer at the distribution across industry, tertiary and residential sectors, it was actually quite fair, fairly even distribution across those consumer groups, so to say, but more readily available in industry. But key for that is going to be enabling those consumers, those industrial consumers, participating in the balancing market at an equal level playing field with traditional generators, and having them be able to benefit from the true costs associated with providing, or the true value of providing those services. So not imposing price caps unnecessarily, for example. And then maybe another final thought, something that for China might be actually a really big opportunity, is introducing in products already the ability to provide flexibility and be smart ready for consumer products as we move into this sector coupled energy system. Make sure that the products that people have in their buildings are already able to participate in new services that market players develop. That's it.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the whole panel for these insights. I have been very encouraged by listening to this, not only the panel but the whole day of presentations. If I look back 2, 3, 4 years, I think we had a lot of more questions how to do this. Now we have quite a few answers, and we have a clear direction for China by the announcement from President Xi Jinping. And we have a power sector who are eager to go in this firm direction. So it is encouraging. It's not only interesting times, it's also encouraging times for not only for China, but for the global energy transition and for the dealing with the climate change. So again, thank you very much. And I will leave the floor to Aurelia Sol for some wrap up and final remarks.
Hello. So I would like first of all to thank you all for all the very interesting presentations today, and thanks also the IEA for gathering so many relevant lecturers for today's workshop. I would say that clean energy transition in China towards carbon neutrality by 2060 is the leading objective of all the cutting edge energy technologies and the deployment options that we have been presented today. Actually, some trends were presented to us today very clearly. And I could mention the centralized energy to decentralized energy, the need for flexibility, and the price going down very sharply, for example, for storage solution with very growing market that could make China energy storage industry achieve a large-scale development during 14th five-year plan period. And with the successful cases and the lesson learned presented today, we gathered pieces of information and inspiration for China's power sector on technical advancement, on potential applications, project configuration principles, or business modes in the power sector. Not to mention critical role of supporting policies and regulatory aspects to bolstering energy transition. And as a representative of a French energy, a French agency for development, supporting the IEA in its work on decarbonation of power sector in China, I am quite sensitive to all the kind of innovative technologies that have been presented today, because it's exactly the type of project we try to finance in China in order to meet Paris Agreement objectives. And among the solutions presented today, I'd like to mention the following ones that draw my attention. the interprovincial electricity market trading with good market design and with increased number of players, but also the energy storage that needs a coexistence of different technologies for different applications, generation, transmission, distribution, or residential, industrial fields. As well, the pump hydro, for which a third party is the investor, and then it's leased back to China Grid. And also, I'd like to mention this heating for households met with the heat pumps. That sounds like a really very good and renewable option. Finally, the smart appliances that could be deployed largely would help giving flexibility. And EV charging could be a solution if smart charging, that means during off-peak times, but also when the vehicle is used to charge the grid when needed. So these are some of the key points that that draw my attention. And anyway, I truly hope that this workshop was a source of inspiration for new policies in China, for new projects, but also a way to foster future cross collaborations between our different specialists present today, and of course, further exchanges. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Aurélie. Yeah. I will give the closing remarks of this event. I will be very brief. First of all, I would like to thank the co-organizers, in particular the Danish Energy Agency, China Electric Power Planning and Engineering Institute, and the Embassy of Denmark in China. It has been a very substantive workshop, I would say. It's in a very short time. I think we have seen many a very good discussion going on in the technology part and in the markets discussion. I think has been very insightful on our side. The objective, as already mentioned, is basically for us to provide inputs for Chinese policymakers in order for them to take the decisions on the benefit of the Chinese system. So I hope we have contributed with that. I would like to thank the Agence Française de Développement, the French Development Agency, and the European Union, who has kindly supported us and the IEA work on the Clean Energy Transition program. Both are very important partners on us for us to be able to work in the association of countries. China is a very important country for the IEA. We are very engaged and contributing to a clean energy transition. So, having said that, I would like to thank all the speakers, the discussants for all your time and all the attendance to this workshop. And I hope we will be able to see physically, hopefully in not so long time. Thanks so much. See you soon.